about the first time you met.
First time I ever saw Anissa. The first time I ever saw Anissa was at a company that we used to work at before. It was a restaurant, Italian restaurant, Mimo's Pavilion. She was at the hostess desk, at the main entrance at the host desk. And I was new. I just joined, and I approached her and I said, hello.
Never has a man been that bold the way he was so bold when he met me.
In typical Anissa fashion, she looked up, looked down at me, and what I remember, how it went, her answer was yes.
And he came up to me and he was like, hey, how are you doing? Like super familiar, as if we knew each other. And I was like, we don't know each other. And I just told him like, listen, I'm at work, I'm not interested. And he was like, not interested in what? And I was like, I'm not interested in having a conversation with you. He was like, oh, I just want to get to know you. And I was like, I don't want to get to know you. Anyway, he left. And then I didn't think about him again. And the next weekend I went to work because it was a part-time job and I was just working weekends. And then I got introduced to the new general manager of the restaurant, and it was him. And then he was obviously very amused, you know, to meet me. And I think he thought that like because he was now my superior, I was going to be apologetic for my behavior. And I was just like, oh, okay, so you work here, you're someone important. And I just carried on. And that was basically our first meeting, yeah.
Going through to the hostess stand in future was a similar experience.
Why do you think you didn't get together all those years ago?
I didn't know that he was interested in me and I wasn't interested in him. So the thought never really occurred to me. And also if I had given it thought, like it just wouldn't have been possible because I was 17 when we met. He was ancient, obviously. We were from two different ends of the spectrum, culture and race-wise. Like, it just wasn't a thing, you know. I remember at that time when I was growing up, interracial couples were very rare. So, like, that wouldn't have even occurred to me. And anyway, as I said, he never made his feelings known to me, so.
So how did you feel when you learned that Anissa was getting married?
There was mixed emotions in that. The reason being, obviously, I was happy for her because her husband at the time had come through to Korea. They had spent time together in Korea. They had decided that this is what they wanted to do, and you have to respect that. On the other side, it was like, she's gone, you know what I mean?
What was it like when you first learned that she was moving to the UAE and you'd be in the same country?
I'd logged onto Skype because I was in South Africa at that time. I'd logged onto Skype and she was green. So I said, hi. I found out that she was 1, in the UAE, 2, was getting divorced, and 3, we were supposed to have been on the same flight. So, but that is the typical thing that happened anyway with Anissa and I anyway. There would always be some miss that would happen. So for me that wasn't a surprise, it was more a case of, okay, great, done.
Describe what your first meeting in the UAE was like after all this time.
I think when he wanted to meet with me that time, and I had just, been going through my divorce. I wasn't interested in him in a romantic sense or in any other sense. But at that point in time, I had just moved to a new country, and he was the only person who knew me as just me, like before marriage, before divorce. Whereas everybody around me at that time knew me as this person who was going through a divorce. And so when he suggested meeting, and I was initially unenthusiastic, but I came around because I needed to feel like a normal person again, like I used to. And he was the only person who had known me before that period in my life. And so I agreed. And I was very apprehensive, not because of him as a person, but because of what I was going through. And I just couldn't fathom how I was gonna even be sociable with someone I hadn't seen in so long. So it was a really complex and complicated time for me on a personal level that actually had nothing to do with him. He just happened to be kind of like a catalyst in the whole situation.
It's just easier. When you've known someone for so many years, 2007, we met in 2007, we were two completely different people, we had a lot of conversations before, a lot of chats had happened before. So I think when we finally saw each other in Abu Dhabi that day, from my side, it reminded me of the one time that we'd met up in Durban, in our home country. Home city, not home country, and there's this overwhelming feeling of of pleasure and it's literally putting play on a paused video, a paused thing. You just pick up and you go, and then obviously you have your cheeky lines which she will have, and I remember clearly she's in the yellow dress. Typical Anissa reading a book or doing something, and that's the second time I had seen her in that type of setup. Her waiting for me, obviously, and reading a book. So, yeah.
What made you decide to take your relationship from friendship to romantic?
He was very pushy. That's the only way I can describe it. I was not interested in a relationship. And again, it wasn't because of him as a person. It was because of my own personal situation. And, when I got divorced, it was you just feel worthless and you feel betrayed and you feel all these negative emotions and you can't, find a way to get past that. So I was dealing with all of that alone in a foreign country where everyone around me had no idea of who I really was as a person other than going through this situation. And then he was really pushy. He was no, this is our chance, we have to seize it. He was Mr. Keating in Dead Poets Society, Carpe Diem and all that. And I was just no. But he did wear me down. And he was really supportive of me as a person, of my situation, and he didn't push me into anything that I was uncomfortable with, and he didn't make me feel claustrophobic. And that was another concern for me, that I would get into a relationship with someone and they would just be so clingy and need me all the time, but he just let me have my own space, and the relationship developed organically.
What was it like to take that next step, moving into marriage?
He was very clear from the first meeting that he wanted a serious commitment to culminate in marriage and possibly a family. He was very forthright about what he wanted. So for me, I knew what I was getting myself into from the get-go. But was I apprehensive? Yes. Again, not because of him, but because I was can I give that much of myself to another person again and put myself out there to the point where I might have to go through the same, if not a worse, emotional trauma. I knew it was going to happen. It wasn't like this big shock. And yeah, I had prepared myself for the idea of it, I guess.
There's always that worry of whether the person will say yes or no. The difference being is that I wanted to build up on a friendship first, to make sure that long term we had a stronger connection than just wanting to marry Anissa. Yeah. There was a lot that I had to change for myself first, to prepare myself to get married, which we had discussed already, but which I had identified. I think in terms of being worried whether she'll say yes, there's always going to be that worry that any guy will have in terms of when you're preparing for the ring, when you're preparing to actually do it. And then obviously if anyone ever knows our engagement story, it would be just a typical Renee moment that would happen, and they'd just be like, oh, is this really going to happen? You know what I mean?
5 years from now, where do you see your relationship and what are your hopes for the future?
Obviously our plans haven't gone, hasn't gone according to, it hasn't gone according to the plan in terms of what we actually said. By this time we wanted that. So I think we need to be a little bit fluid in terms of where we are in 5 years or what we actually want to do in 5 years. There's a lot that has come up between both of our lives in terms of work and stuff like that. From my side, obviously, if we are able to have kids, that would be the dream, if we are. I know that we won't be in the Middle East, so I cannot see I cannot see us staying in the Middle East. That was something that we had always discussed. We always said there was always a time limit of how long we actually wanted to stay in the Middle East. So destination-wise, obviously it's going to be more of Asia side. Family-wise, we'll definitely have Chai, and there might be a baby or babies, but I don't know. That for me would be that for me would be the dream.
I think it's impossible to say where we'll be in 5 years, realistically speaking, because I never imagined I would be in this situation 5 years ago. And that's just the nature of life, especially if you're an expat. I have no idea if we'll be in Qatar or we'll be somewhere else. But I hope that at that time we will still be considerate of each other and growing together and still learning things about each other and in a committed, peaceful partnership. Because sometimes it's not peaceful, but that's life. I want to be on a beach house, summering in Europe. I want him to be working so I can summer alone.
But with everything in our relationship, it's ifs and how it actually happens. That's it? Oh wow, okay.